Hello, and welcome to another episode of Book Talks. We have another really exciting guest lined up, and I have been looking forward to this one for pretty much the whole month. Not that I'm biased or anything. Um, we are so fortunate to have in our community so many amazing people that cover a spectrum of backgrounds and experiences. Oh my gosh, perfect. I had my emergency like extra long intro planned just because like that's life. And I was like, okay, good. That's if I prepare the extra long intro, then everything's going to work perfectly. So bingo. So for everyone who is watching and going to join, I want to welcome our special guest, Leah Ward Lee, who I am going to try to treat with the fairness of one of our regular extra special guests, but Leah is an extra special guest. So
Thank
I'm going
you,
to do
Connor.
what I can. Um, so Leah is a local community member on Amelia Island and a great friend of Story and Song, but she is so much more. She is an activist, a businesswoman, a retired service member, and an author, just to list a very small few of the many accomplishments that Leah has. And we are so fortunate that while we like to emphasize local and authors and everything in between, Leah is the encapsulation of all of these things, because Leah has brought with her a fabulous book called $1,000 Startups, which anyone who's been in Story and Song recently has seen and heard me talk about it, because I have a special connection, as my other business, Millennial Touch, is a member of the $1,000 Startups Consortium, and none of that would be possible. Really, my business itself would not exist without Leah. So thank you, Leah, so much for joining me tonight.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm pretty excited now. Truth in lending, for everybody that's watching, Connor coaches me in social media. So I've never done an Instagram anything before. This is the first time for me, so I was just a little bit nervous. But since it's with Connor and we meet regularly, I'm not as nervous as I would be.
Well, thank you, Leah, as always, for making me feel good about myself with every word. But also, thank you for making time to join with us. And because I know you have a lot of things going on, and it's the end of January, the end of the month, and for everyone, that means, and it's getting into tax season. And so I wanted to just start right away and talk a little bit about your background and what led you to the idea, the concept of $1,000 Startups that would become the book, and that we also know would eventually become the nonprofit $1,000 Startups Consortium.
Well, I have to tell you that one of the things that I appreciated as I was trying to get established in a career was that I started out in the Army, really. And in the Army, there was just all kind of opportunity. But what you had to do was go find it. But if you were willing to look for it, it was there. What's changed, however, over time is the opportunities that were available to people in the service are very different today. They're not as open as they were when I joined, although there's certainly more opportunities open to women once they're in, but not the opportunities that I was afforded to get a great education while I was in the service and to just be at it just felt like if I had the energy and could go after it, it was opportunity that was there. So I was able to go to college the whole time I was in the service almost, except when I'd be in school somewhere. And so from that, I had a real solid foundation by the time I retired. What I didn't know is when I started corporate life, I would hate it. I just hated it. I didn't like anything about being in a corporation. It seemed like the people that didn't work together, and there were the haves and the have-nots. They didn't work as a team. And it wasn't them. I was the outlier. I just didn't understand how it worked. So I decided I'd always had a little business, except when I was going to school or except when I was doing something else. But I probably by that time had 10 little businesses that I started. And as I moved around in the Army, I'd start a little business wherever I went and then either sell it or just close it down when I left. So I had the entrepreneurial bug, and I thought, you know, I'm miserable in corporate life. And I was at in the C-suite as the chief technology officer for two huge firms. I said, well, what do I know how to do better than anybody else? And it's like, what I know how to do better than anybody else is to how to get from here to there in the least amount of time and doing it most efficiently. Okay, I'm going to be a business consultant and I'm going to figure out how to do this. So I studied and studied and studied and launched my new business. And my whole marketing scheme was, I had always written Christmas cards, holiday cards. And so I went and got some business cards printed. And as a matter of fact, I think I printed them myself on my old dot matrix printer and put one in each and every one of the Christmas cards that I sent out advertising my new consulting business. And believe it or not, I got clients from that, and word of mouth just spread. And just like the rule that I like to talk about over again and again and again, it's amazing how you make an expert. It just takes 10,000 hours to do it. And at about 10,000 hours, I finally really knew what I was doing. So I never had to advertise. My clients are just a host of household names like Boeing and State Farm, First Health, 2 different states, lots and lots of aerospace clients. And I thoroughly enjoyed that. But about, 15 years into it, I was so just, things started to really, really change for me. The disparity between what was being made in the C-suite and what was being made by the people who were actually doing the work really started to trouble me. And the turning point was, I was at a client site and I was helping them be successful. And the reason they were being successful was the people who were working on the shop floor. They were willing to try something different to move these aircraft out more quickly. And so we literally saved that company because everybody down in the floor worked together, and the C-suite worked with us. But then instead of rewarding those workers who'd done so much, what they did was, now that their share price was up high because of the success that they were having in delivering this aircraft, they laid off a bunch of workers, fired their consultants, and used the money to buy back their stock, which made many of the C-suite people millionaires. And then they sold the company. So I felt betrayed, and I can't imagine how the people felt. And so it was that turning point where I realized, you know, if this can happen here, let me sit down and think about the other companies that I've worked with and look and see what they're doing now. And I realized that that disparity between the workers and the workers' security and the C-suite and who was making decision was growing wider. It's like, why? I was too close to it for a long time. I didn't recognize it. So I started thinking about what was the one way that someone, like one of those workers that had been displaced and all of a sudden found themselves without a job, they might have gotten some severance, but what could they do to prepare for that? Because those people would eventually go back to work doing something else. But what if they were the business owners? How could things be different? I said, well, they probably got a family to support, so they're going to continue to need to find a job. But what's the least amount of money you could start a business for? And I thought, well, maybe $1,000. Let me see if you could start a business for $1,000. I spent the next 5 years looking for businesses you could start for about $1,000. I must have talked to hundreds, literally hundreds of small business owners. about their business and how they'd started. How would they do it if they only had $1,000? And meanwhile, I wrote this down, and it took me 5 years to write the book. And then, true to form, I started consulting a different way, where I would only take things that the values were the same as my own, where they had to agree to be ethical with their employees. And it's always a one-on-one relationship with the client or with the consultant and their work with. So if I didn't feel they were doing their people right, I certainly couldn't be their consultant, and I just wouldn't take the job. And jobs got fewer, by the way. But what didn't stop was time. And as I started to get to the stage of life where I said, I just really am to the point I don't want to do this anymore, COVID hit. And so my son, who's also a writer, and, we write about what we want to learn about and what we know about, and mostly what we want to know more about. So he wrote about financial freedom. And during the pandemic, it was just amazing to me how we live on this little island where our principal activity is tourism. And the people who provide that service are the people in the service industry. And all of these people are all out of work. And we don't know when we're back. And Tony and I were talking about this opportunity to get called back. We figured they'd be called back to work in a month or two. Let's go ahead and offer a scholarship to these programs, because we've both written a book and we've both written courses to go with the book so that people could follow along. And what was missing was a cohort, because I had never marketed the book, and Tony did a little bit of teaching, but mostly with other people that were in the service industry to teach them, because that was his passion. But we hadn't really marketed the books. That wasn't our primary source of income, and we really weren't interested in making money that way. We were interested in getting the word out. So we decided, okay, let's try this out. And we'll offer scholarships to the community, and anybody who takes the course during this pilot phase to see if it'll work, we'll give them $1,000 to start a business. And some people signed up, and some people opened businesses, and we invited the whole community to come to the business fairs with us. And we had more than 30 local and area businesses come to the fairs. And so we thought, well, this is a pretty good proof of concept. I guess we'll just go ahead and file for nonprofit status. And that's where we are right now. Aren't you glad you asked?
I am so glad I asked. It's sort of like, but for me, obviously, it's sort of like home movies, like hearing those stories, like that story, obviously you and I have talked about and I've gotten to be a part of, but it's much like you said, it's nice knowing that other people are getting to hear it too and hear about all this. And the thing that really stands out to me about your whole approach, and this is one of the things that makes, I think, like you and $1,000 Startup so connected with Story and Song, is that you and Donna are so much of a similar vein, because Donna went through the same thing. She was in the corporate world and she hated it, and she looked around and found that people were not ruled by their principles or by their values, or at least not ethically speaking. Their values may not have been ethical. And that was what made her want to leave and forge her own path where the business was hers, and she could run it in such a way that it aligned with her beliefs, and she never had to feel like she was sacrificing any of her own spirit in terms of that. And I just think that it's amazing how this island, this small community, is host to so many people who are like that, who are driven by really admirable values and by like caring about what they're doing and putting out into the world and wanting the betterment of their community. And I think it's no surprise that when I met you, you already knew Donna and Mark, because, both of you guys loom so large for me in terms of what a business person can be, that there's no need to sacrifice success in favor of following your values and your personal convictions. Um, Now, you talked a little bit about the consortium at the end, obviously, to summarize. So, what made you feel that Amelia Island itself needed a way for people to? I know you talked a little bit about tourism and the service industry, but that this community was right and ripe for a group like this, emphasizing entrepreneurship for regular people. You know.
Well, there's more than one community here, which is very interesting to me. There's the very affluent community, and there's some good people there. But then there's a African American community that has a deep history and deep roots. Then there's a service community that works serving the tourism industry. And when I look at the disparity in income between those different populations, it's just the perfect place for entrepreneurism. There are people here who can honestly do about anything. And if you look at, if you really look around at the services that are needed, there's all these homes here that are vacant half the year, or they're rented. So there's the opportunity for service people to do that. Ergo, 10 different kind of businesses come to mind. There's a huge arts and crafts community of really amazing artisans, bingo, businesses. There's all types of classes going on for health and for spirituality and for eating. Bingo, another just gold mine of businesses. And what I've learned about businesses is there's that tipping point where if you get enough small businesses working together, they can literally create a revolution. And that revolution leads to economic disparity and economic opportunity for others. So the small businesses that participated this year, they're in their early days. Some of them are side hustles, and some of them are actually registered businesses. No matter. Out of those, some will grow and go to the next level where they can actually support the entrepreneur full time. Then they'll go to the next level where they're starting to hire people. And if they are already so ingrained in the community and in the thinking of ethical entrepreneurship, they will offer a fair living wage. They will buy local, which is not only good for the economy, it's good for the environment, and it's good for opportunity, and it's good for the suppliers of those businesses. It's just, it's unbelievable how much talent there is here on this little island. I don't think I've talked to anybody who doesn't know someone just one degree of separation who has a small business or who wants to start one.
And it's interesting because even someone who doesn't know or isn't familiar with $1,000 startups or entrepreneurship or like very, very small small businesses, it is obvious to everyone who lives here that we have a fantastic community of small businesses, which Story and Song is very lucky to be a part of. And part of one of our big values at Story and Song is shopping local, not just for books, obviously, but for everything, because there's such an opportunity on this island to have everything that we need without having to order it online, and to buy it from a place right here on the island or just over the bridge. And that is something that especially the last few and the next coming up on this series is so important, because Book Talks, is obviously, in your case, we have a fabulous book that we can actually reference, but Book Talks is just the heart of Story and Song and our relationship to this community, which is defined by an amazing group of small business owners who share a lot of the same values in terms of supporting local and shopping, looking here first for for whatever you need. And it doesn't just extend to retail and shopping. It's also services and consulting and all kinds of, like you said, like courses, artistic opportunities, all manner of things are so, this island really is a microcosm of so many, because so many people from around the world and around the country and bringing different ideas and skills to this shockingly small little geographic area, you know, and you're reminded how small it is when whenever you talk to anyone, but also B, whenever you're driving around. And so, but I just think that it is a really, I know that in the short time I've been here, Amelia Island looms so large for me in my mind and my heart, and I have my businesses here, and you know, I care so much about it. But it's speaking with people like yourself that remind me, just for the 100th time today alone, why it's so special. And it draws people like yourself and Donna and Mark and all these people who want to come and be a part of the business community, or just part of the, you know, human community on this island. And I think that's so special.
As do I. And I see something through this pandemic changing, where we are becoming closer. We are recognizing the value of having individual relationships with not only our customers, but our suppliers and our neighbors. Before the pandemic, I didn't really know any of my neighbors. I was always so busy with my business, or working, or trying to remodel this, or trying to do that, that I was one of those neighbors that wave. You knew you could count on me in a pinch if I happened to be in town. But through this, I've really gotten to know my neighbors. And I'm so lucky. They're so wonderful and interesting and smart. The wealth of knowledge we have here. I'll tell you what, we could open a university here with everything that I don't think there's a topic that we couldn't cover. Unbelievable.
I would have to agree. I just thinking of retired teachers alone here and professors. And the very last thing I want to mention, and you touched on this already, but it's such a pivotal part of $1,000 startups, is the emphasis on providing opportunities and knowledge for people who are in disenfranchised communities, you know. And you addressed the inequalities here on the island, especially felt by, you know, our small African American population here on the island. And that's a big part of what you you know, talk about personally, and what gets woven into the fabric of your books. And obviously, I also have a copy of Tony Lee's Bartender's Guide to Financial Freedom, but this is Leah's show. Tony can come on another time for his book. Actually, I hope he would. Everyone would really be lucky to get to see Tony. But anyway, so, and this is the very last show of this month. And next month, obviously, we're starting Black History Month, and we have some amazing stuff lined up. But part of the reason that I wanted the last week in January to be you, Leah, is that you have done so much work in this community to help, you know, disenfranchised members of our community and communities within our own. And it's such a huge part of your entrepreneurship. And I think that is both very interesting and also very admirable.
Well, not so much. So for those of you who know me, you know that my son is mixed. And in this country, if you're mixed, that means you're Black. And when I had been coming down here for years and years and years before Tony ever came down. He was busy, right? And the first time he came down, he and his dad flew down to have a look at my house, because we'd had a couple of hurricanes and I was out on a job in Nevada and couldn't leave. So they came down to survey the damage for me and did some work and fixed it. And that was his moment. We all have one of those moments where you make the decision to change your life. And he was working 80 hours a week and just absolutely exhausted. But when he first got here and decided to move, he still faced some of the barriers that I didn't know existed. And when we really started to think about how many barriers there still were, I wanted to do something to connect our communities, not because I'm doing something admirable, but I think that we all benefit when we have the full strength of the community. And if you're unable, yeah, if you work 40 hours a week and you can't support your family, it's just absolutely stressful. And quite frankly, it's not fair. Somebody, we have to do something about it. And you look around and say, well, the government, no, the government's not going to do anything about this in enough time to affect the single mom, the young Black man who can't afford to go to college and he's left high school and now he's working for minimum wage because he needed to go to work to help his family. And I can go on and on and on about the people who've been disenfranchised, and it's not out of pity. It's out of there is talent there. And unless we figure out a way to help each other, we will never make this better. And we can see what's happened politically. We're just all so divided. So I want the $1,000 Startups to Consortium to be a place where we get together and we work together and we learn together. So next month I'll be at Story and Song talking about the program and having an information session for anybody who's interested in starting a business or growing the business that they have, so that they can be a part of this consortium and they can go through the program and launch a business as well. If they need the funding for it, we'll find the funding for them. But even if you have a little money, and I talk about it as $1,000 startup, you don't need $1,000 to start a business. The program shows you how to make the money all the way through to try out your idea. Because one of the things that I figured out was, well, let me tell you a personal story. I started a business one time, and it was a lot of work to start it, and I put a lot of money into it. The name of it was Auntie Leah's Swap Shop. And, you know, I was really involved in the climate movement, and I thought we were wasting too much stuff, and I wanted to find a way to recycle it. And I thought, you know, all these people have things that they don't want. I will learn to do this. And so I studied consignment stores. I talked to people who had done it. I thought I knew exactly what I was doing. I launched it, and it was doing pretty well. But I was working 23 hours a day. I was a mess. And it only took about 9 months, because I quit my job to do it. And it only took about 9 months for me to realize I hated that business. I hated being in that business and haggling over $1 for a pair of shoes that had been worn one time. It's like, oh my goodness, no, this is just the wrong business for me. And had I only invested a little bit, I would have been so far ahead of the power curve in understanding, is this the business I want to be in? And I would have built the infrastructure before I put so much into it so that I didn't have to work 23 hours a day and get burned out. So from that lesson, it wasn't anymore that, oh, I just didn't have the money. I had the money to start the business. I had the money to put too much money into a business. That was a problem. So I love the idea of everybody that goes through the course starts off at the same place, because the course won't allow you to invest too much until you try, until you get to the next step, until you build this next thing, so that you see if this is what you want to do. In fact, in the last course, we had 3 people that switched the businesses that they thought they wanted to be in to something else. Mid-program, it's like, oh, heck no, I don't want to do this. What am I doing? This is no fun. I'm spending all these hours. Oh, good gracious. I cannot make a living doing this. And I loved that. I loved that. They hadn't spent much money. And they were getting scholarships, all of them, for us all to learn. They hadn't even spent $100 before they came to that realization. It's like, boy, wouldn't you pay $100 not to make the mistake that I made with Auntie Leah's?
Well, Leah, you have like this is only a glimmer into the amazing, amazing things that you can learn from this book, Thousand Dollar Startup. This is my well-worn copy, of course, because I have had it and loved it for a long time now. But Leah, I want to thank you so, so much for being on the series. We really, really appreciate it. And you took the words right out of my mouth. Next month, we're doing a combination live in-person and live stream event at Story and Song, where people can come and ask you questions about your expertise and learn about entrepreneurship. And really, for me, which is so striking, which is the accessibility. But you've talked about it the whole time, which is that like we all have ability to do this. It doesn't have to be so intimidating, and that's such a huge part of the book as well. So Leah, as I mentioned, is the author of $1,000 Startups and the founder of the $1,000 Startups Consortium, which is just putting her money where her mouth is and helping these new entrepreneurs. And we are so, so excited to talk again next month at an event. And it's on our website. You'll see it on Facebook. And we're just really, really looking forward to that. So thank you again, Leah, for making time to talk with us today.
Thank you, Connor. Thank you, Story and Song. Thank you, Millennial Touch.
Yeah, I was going to say this brought to you by Story and Song and Millennial Touch. Oh gosh, the glare is terrible. Millennial Touch. Anyway, thank you so much, Leah. Thanks for everyone who watched live and will watch after. And hopefully we'll see you next month in person for Leah's book talk at Story and Song.
Thanks, Connor.
Thank you.